Hello, everyone. If you saw my post on Facebook, you know this was coming. I think since Spider-Man Homecoming is close to its release date, it's like almost a month away, it's time that I actually do a reason why I'm not looking forward to this film. It has nothing to do with the casting of Zendaya. At this point, I don't fucking care. There's more pressing issues than having a black girl play Mary Jane. I don't think I was foolish when I saying that. But the biggest problem for me, why I'm not looking forward to this film, is the handling of the Spider-Man franchise. I'm gonna let you guys know I love the character of Spider-Man. He's my favorite comic book character. He's my favorite superhero. I find him relatable, probably the most relatable, at least of all the superheroes for me. And I feel like we had not had a good Spider-Man movie. Let's be honest here. I may have liked Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, but I don't remember them that fondly, really. I watched the original Spider-Man trilogy. 3 is still a piece of shit in my eyes, but 1 and 2, they were really good. In fact, I could argue some of the greatest comic book movies ever, better than every MCU movie ever made. And I'm going to get to that later on why I think that is. It's just Sony, ever since Spider-Man 3, has not been able to handle Spider-Man, the character, or the villains. They have decades worth of great material to draw from. And I don't have a problem with Spider-Man Homecoming having the Vulture. And before you people say, oh, you're just some person who's only watched the movies. I have comics, assholes. Oh, I don't care about your elitist mentality. Oh, these are trades. They're not signal issues. Don't care. I own comics. I own more Spider-Man comics than I own Batman comics. I love this character. I loved him so much, I wanted to read the source material. And some of this stuff is going to be new for you guys. Yes, that's how much I love the character, that I'm willing to read the source material of Spider-Man. Unlike most people who are blindly, oh man, I can't wait for Spider-Man Homecoming. You guys never read a fucking comic, most of you. It has nothing to do with them straying off the source material. It's just other issues too. First, I'm going to just cover a few categories. Spider-Man 4, when I really think about it, I feel like we were robbed of a true send-off for Tobey Maguire. I mean, I was blinded by my hatred for Spider-Man 3 for a time. I didn't even see any of the original movies for almost a decade. And then when I watched him again, I realized what a good Spider-Man he truly was. I think a lot of people give him too much shit and over glorify the other two actors. Sure, he may not have been as funny as, the new kid or Andrew Garfield, but I felt like he did a perfect balance of playing the character of Spider-Man and the character of Peter Parker as well, because they're both two. You could view them as separate people. He was able to do both well. Andrew Garfield was able to do Spider-Man, but he could not do Peter Parker that well. The new kid, I thought he was obnoxious, honestly. I really did. I did not like the new kid. I felt he was the worst of the three actors. And I know some of you was like, oh, but you can't judge him based on what little we see of him in Civil War. To be honest with you, I don't really like a high school Spider-Man. I'd rather have Spider-Man in college. Which is why Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was the most relatable of the three. He was in college throughout the entire trilogy. And it feels like Disney is stepping in a lot of ways. I believe Sony has a big part in it too, but it's just the the one thing I'm really getting sick of, and I didn't notice this until I watched the MCU movies and in bulk, is something I'm really getting sick of in an MCU is having to crack a joke every 5 seconds. And I'm exaggerating, but Spider-Man, yes, he make some jokes. He does make fun of his enemies, which I think is funny. But what little I've seen of him in Civil War, it was obnoxious and not Spider-Man at all. I mean, I want a balance between something serious and occasionally make a joke, not in your face all the time. Not to mention, I don't see the kid as Peter Parker or Spider-Man. He feels like a different character entirely. He feels like a Disney character rather than a Marvel character. It feels like that Marvel and Disney, Sony and Disney are like have their own version of who Spider-Man is. And not to mention another point, the reboot. Oh my God, am I tired of the reboot? I mean, had they done Spider-Man 4, then included Spider-Man in Civil War and not make the Amazing Spider-Man movies, I would have been all right with the reboot. At least enough time would have passed where it would have not. But we've had 2 reboots in not even 10 years of Spider-Man. He didn't even have that many reboots in the comics in that short amount of time. At least, I know Marvel does it, a lot nowadays, but they didn't reboot that often with the character of Spider-Man. But then again, Marvel readers or ex-Marvel readers may know more than I do. It's like I'm not interested in investing myself into another version of the character, especially since I'm going to get into this another day. It's just going to feel like another MCU movie and not a Spider-Man movie, which is another point. I do not like the fact that they're shoehorning Robbie Downey Jr. in this movie. Spider-Man can stand on his own. This is the first time we get to see Marvel Studios do their own interpretation of the character of Spider-Man. This is their chance to prove to Spider-Man fans like myself that they can do it right. And it's like they have no faith that he could succeed on his own. And quite frankly, I don't like the idea of him being in there, especially since this is Spider-Man's first time in the MCU. I'm going by that has his own solo adventure. It's like, why can't we just have his first movie just be involved with Spider-Man? I personally do not like crossovers with Spider-Man. I prefer Spider-Man to be on his own, to have his own stories, which is why what little Spider-Man's comics I've read, believe me, there's so many comics. That's why I say little, because there's thousands. My least favorite stories involving Spider-Man are the ones that are crossovers. And I feel like for the first movie that Spider-Man, a solo film, it doesn't feel like a solo film when you have Tony Stark in there as well. And I don't like the fact that he designed the suit for Peter Parker either. Honestly, it makes it seem like he's not as smart as he is in the other 2 versions that we've seen on screen. And another point, the final one, I don't care what you Marvel MCU fanboys say. Let's be honest with ourselves. Come on. I know it's popular to say that the DCEU's villains are forgettable, they suck, there's nothing interesting about them, yet have you guys looked in the mirror? Name a single villain that is actually good in the Marvel MCU besides Loki. When even Loki sucks if you really think about it. None of them are memorable. And some of these characters are amazing in the comics. But in the movies, they suck. They really do. And I don't want Spider-Man, being one-dimensional, because That's what most of the MCU movies are. Most of the characters are pretty one note. There's not much to them. And the comics, there's so much more to them. They wouldn't be, around for so many years if they were one-dimensional characters. And there's nothing that really stands out. Now, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films, the first two, you know what made those so great? The villains. The Green Goblin and Doc Ock. I know the Green Goblin looks silly, but who cares about his look? Let's talk about the actors that play those characters. Not only do we have a great hero, we had an equally good villain that challenges that hero. The Green Goblin in Spider-Man 1, in my opinion, is probably one of the greatest comic book movie villains of all time. I put him higher than Jack Nicholson's Joker and almost on this level of Heath Ledger's Joker. I don't care what you Dark Knight fanboys say. That's how great of a villain he was. He was like the exact opposite of Peter Parker. Not to mention, he had a personal connection to him too. And the actor that played him did such a great job playing a sociopath, because that's what Norman Osborn is in the comics. He was so faithful to the character that it was amazing. Even he may not look like the Green Goblin in the comics, the way his character was portrayed more than made up for it. It's like you don't even care how the Green Goblin looks. Sure, he looks kind of stupid, but it's the character that matters. And Spider-Man 1 is my favorite movie because of the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin's my favorite Spider-Man villain. Now, Spider-Man 2, which is considered the best Spider-Man movie of all time, which I don't think it is, but it deserves the praise that it gets. Why is that such a great movie too? Is because of the villain. Again, Dr. Octavius has a personal connection with Peter Parker. He respected him. To see that the person that he once admired turning into a murderous psychopath, it adds a lot of conflict. And not to mention, that movie is, in my opinion, the best Spider-Man movie in a lot of ways, because this pretty much, you get to see Mary Jane and Spider-Man's characters develop. Their character arcs, are well done. And had there not been another movie after Spider-Man 2, it would have been a great ending to the series. You get to see Peter Parker actually going through, the struggles of being Spider-Man. The first one, you don't see it as much because, it's the origin story. But the second one, you get to see so much more. And you're not going to see that in any of the Spider-Man movies that Disney will make. Don't deny it. The only superhero in the MCU that really has a character arc that really struggles is Steve Rogers. Why? Because he's a person that is not even from, the 21st century. He's out of his element. The world that he knows doesn't exist. Everyone that he knows is dead. And he has to cope with that. And you see that in Captain America Winter Soldier, which I think is the best of the MCU. Honestly, it had a great villain too, the Winter Soldier. He had a personal connection to Steve Rogers, and it had a conflict to it. Not to mention, you fought the government, basically being controlled by Hydra. You had great villains in Captain America with the Winter Soldier. Captain America's Civil War, it's not a bad film, but the weakest part of it, in my opinion, was Spider-Man. What made that movie good is, depending on your point of view, either Tony Stark or Steve Rogers are the villains of that movie. You could argue that both of them are. There isn't really a good or a bad. And those are the best films in the MCU for that reason. Even though I said in my top 10 best comic movies of all time that Avengers is one of the best comic book movies, I said that purely because of what it did and its impact on comic book films. I don't want this movie to be another one of those films where you're just going to walk out of the theater and not even remember anything about that movie. I love the character of Spider-Man, and Spider-Man deserves a great film again. There hasn't been a good Spider-Man movie since 2004. It's been over 13 years since we've had a Spider-Man movie that was good. 14 years. This character deserves better. He really does. He's a great character. There's a reason he's existed as long as he has. And I do not want a great actor like Michael Keaton's Vulture to be a forgettable role that no one's going to remember. Because I can see that easily happening. Because they can't write a good villain for shit most of the time. And you want a movie that's going to be remembered long after it's shown in theaters? You got to have a good villain in a comic book movie. The villain is about as important as the hero. You don't want to do with what Tim Burton did, where the villain overshadows the hero and have the villain be more memorable than the hero. You got to do a balance of both. And I feel like Spider-Man, at least the first two films, was probably the best example on how to do a great villain and not have the hero be overshadowed by it and vice versa. In my opinion. And that's my 2 cents on why I'm not excited for Spider-Man Homecoming. I'll see it in theaters and hope for the best. Please, God, do not suck. And see you guys next time. Oh, by the way, Andre, I know you're going to watch this video. Eat a fucking dick, bitch.